so they give us a yellow one. Good morning. The administrative meeting of the Public Service Commission will come to order. Before us today we have 5 items, but before we begin we have minutes to approve from the October 2nd, 2019 meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
The minutes are approved. Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, we have 2 items on the consent agenda this morning. Item number 1 is South Star Energy Service, LLC, DBA Maryland Energy, filed a notice of its intention to cease providing service in the Baltimore Gas and Electric Service Area pursuant to COMR 2054-0305. And item 2 is Direct Energy RS Gas, Inc., filed a request to cancel its natural gas supplier license.
Thank you. Do commissioners have questions on the consent items?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I had a question for item number 1.
Do we have staff available?
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Paige Shaw on behalf of staff.
Hi, good morning. I just had a question regarding South Star Energy's choice to leave the BGE market but still remain active in Maryland. Did they provide any reason or justification as to why they were leaving just one service territory?
We spoke to the company and they said it just makes more fiscal sense to only concentrate in WGL rather than both.
Okay.
I can ask more if you'd like.
No, that's fine. If they find it fiscally more beneficial for them, that's their prerogative. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Shaw, so are utilities required to let us know that they're pulling out of particular service territories?
Yeah.
They are required. Okay. Thank
Because
you.
they have to give notice to their customers if they have any in that service territory to cease providing for them.
Okay. That would seem to make sense. Okay. Thank you. Is there a motion on these 2 items?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. For item number 1, I move that we grant the company's request to remove the BGE service area from its gas supplier license. And for item number 2, I move we approve the cancellation request.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
The motions are approved. Mr. Secretary, the administrative agenda.
First item number 3, is INTO FC Stone Financial, Inc., filed an application for a license to supply electricity or electric generation services in Maryland.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. Michael Jang on behalf of staff. This item addresses a request by International FC Stone Financial, Inc. for authorization to serve as an electricity broker for CNI customers. International FC Stone is an electricity broker in Illinois, Massachusetts, Ohio, Delaware, DC, and Pennsylvania. Staff received a response from all states other than Delaware, and no complaints have been filed against the company in any of the other states. In 2013, the Commission authorized an affiliate of International FC Stone to serve as an electricity broker under license number IR 2906. The affiliate, FC Stone LLC, was a wholly owned subsidiary of International FC Stone Financial, Inc. In 2015, the affiliate was merged into International FC Stone, but failed to notify the Commission about this merger. In its filing, International FC Stone Secretary and Counsel David Bolt states, "It has been my oversight in not submitting a new registration application in the name of International FC Stone Financial, Inc. in their interim, and my only explanation is that have focused on the fact that the internal staff has remained unchanged, as has the services and operations. Our clients have not been harmed, we have no residential customers, and we have not added any commercial or industrial customers in the interim. In addition, annual total gross operating revenues reports have continued to be filed, and annual assessments have continued to be filed and paid, all in the name of FC Stone LLC. Staff is concerned by the company's failure to notify the Commission regarding the merger of the affiliate into the company, and by the company's failure to request Commission authorization to operate as a broker, but staff is not recommending that the Commission take any action against International FC Stone for this violation. As explained by an applicant, the company has not added any new customers after taking over the LLC's operations, and all Commission required reports and assessments have been paid under the affiliate's license. In addition, no complaints have been filed against the affiliate. So staff recommends that the Commission authorize International FC Stone to operate as an electricity broker.
Thank you, Mr. Jang. Do we have counsel for FC Stone present today? We don't, but I do see that letter that you were reading from their Secretary and Counsel, Mr. Bolt, dated August 21st, where he did accept responsibility for the failure to file on time. Do commissioners have questions? Is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, for item number 3, I move we grant the company a license to operate as an electricity supplier in Maryland, limited to the broker services for customer classes and service territories applied for and recommended by staff. Direct the company to provide marketing and training materials specific to its Maryland operations to the commission staff 30 days prior to utilization of the materials in Maryland, and direct the company to file notice with the commission within 30 days of any changes to the information in the application.
Thank you. Is there, all in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved.
Next item on the agenda, item number 4 is Todd Solar LLC filed a request for approval of a decommissioning plan pursuant to PPRP condition number 23 in case number 9412.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. This is DeAndre Wilson speaking on behalf of staff. On December 21st, 2015, in case number 9412, Todd Solar requested a CPCN to construct a 20-megawatt solar generating facility in Dorchester County, Maryland. The company's request was granted by the Commission in June of 2016, along with several licensing conditions proposed by Department of Natural Resources Power Plant Research Program. These licensing conditions were later revised in 2018 by PPRP as a condition of the approval of an additional request by the company to modify the timelines of the project. The revised licensing conditions filed by PPRP included an additional requirement that Todd Solar file a solar decommissioning plan with the Commission for approval, which is the subject of this admin item. After its review of Todd Solar's decommissioning plan filed July 16, 2019, staff did not believe the filing met the requirements of sections A, B, or C of PPRP's licensing condition number 23. Due to the abandonment of cabling greater than 4 feet in depth and the miscalculation of the estimate provided for the disassembly and removal of the tracking system at Todd Solar's project site. With the absence of the estimated cost to remove all components, cables, and wires below ground surface, and the miscalculation of the disassembly and removal of the tracking system, staff did not believe Todd Solar's original decommissioning plan reflected an accurate total estimated cost for the decommissioning of the Todd Solar project site, and therefore did not believe Todd Solar could successfully implement a financial mechanism that could ensure that decommissioning costs would not be borne by the state and or Dorchester County. After further discussion between staff and Todd Solar, the company filed a revised decommissioning plan with the Commission on October 4, 2019, that staff believes is a more accurate reflection of the total estimated cost to decommission the Todd Solar project site. In its revised decommissioning plan, the company added the estimated cost to remove all below ground surface components, cables, and wires, regardless of depth, to the total estimated decommissioning cost. In addition, the company corrected what it says was a typo, in which the cost per unit amount associated with the disassembly and removal of the tracking system should have read $425 per unit and not $450 per unit. With this adjustment, the estimated cost provided equals the $386,750 as initially stated in the company's original decommissioning plan, bringing the total estimated decommissioning cost of the Todd Solar project site to $967,563. In conclusion, staff does not believe that Todd Solar's decommissioning plan filed July 16, 2019 meets the requirements of the conditions number 23, A, B, and C proposed by PPRP, but the revised plan is satisfactory. Staff recommends that the Commission approve Todd Solar's revised decommissioning plan filed on October 4, 2019.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. I see we have counsel for PPRP. Do you wish to make any comments? Mr. Wilson, if you could vacate.
No, Chairman, we are also agree with staff, and we have no objections to the revised plan at this.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have a representative from Dorchester County with us today? No. Okay. Counsel for Todd Solar.
Chairman, excuse me, but Mr. Sadinsky, who's with me too, he's a project manager for this. He has talked with the county. If you have any questions about that discussion.
Okay. Does the county have any concerns, Mr. Sadinsky, that you're aware of?
I spoke to them yesterday, and they also agree with this new revised decommissioning plan.
Okay, so you could represent that for the county.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Biegelmans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. David Bugelmans on behalf of Todd Solar LLC. As Mr. Wilson indicated, on Friday, Todd Solar submitted to the Commission a revised decommissioning plan that addressed the two deficiencies identified by staff and PPRP. With these two revisions, PPRP staff in Dorchester County all support approval of the plan. So I'll end my comments there, but I'm happy to answer any questions about the revised plan. Thank you very much for consideration.
Thank you. I was simply curious. I know the original plan was to abandon in place any cabling or infrastructure that was below 4 feet. How much cabling is actually below 48 inches below the surface?
That's a good question, Your Honor. I don't have the exact number in front of me. I do believe it was, I think, fairly substantial, and that was the concern from PPRP and staff. But again, after we received several data requests from staff, we had a phone call with PPRP, which I think was primarily concerned about this, and we realized that the condition required removal of all the underground cabling, and it was really an oversight. We had based, or the consultant had reviewed previously approved plans, and some of the previously approved plans for NB Solar 1 and NB Solar 2 included a provision to leave some of the cabling in place. So that's the reason why it made it in there. But after we had that discussion, we realized it was a mistake, and we immediately corrected it.
Will you also be updating the amount of the performance bond to reflect the additional $22,000?
That's correct, Your Honor. So the updated decommissioning cost in the revised plan reflects the full cost of removal, and the project will file a financial mechanism to cover that cost. And then every 5 years, that'll be updated per the condition.
Thank you. Commissioners. Commissioner Richard.
Yeah, just a question really for staff and PPRP. I was just looking at the decommissioning plan, and I'm interested to know the thinking behind not using, in the estimates, looking at the estimates, the fact that you're only using 2018, 2019 prices, not considering inflation, since these are supposed to be estimates of future costs. And also, it's even stated in the decommissioning plan that the cost will really be dependent, I think, quote here, dependent on labor costs at the time of decommissioning. I'd just be interested to know why you don't require some kind of an escalator or just, a maybe a more accurate look at future decommissioning costs. And I understand these are going to be updated every 5 years, but shouldn't we be looking to get the best estimates now? Not that one project's going to cause an issue, but the fact that we may have an aggregate of many projects out there and future liabilities.
Based on staff's understanding, these estimates were provided to Todd Solar by their third-party contractor. The decision to provide 18 to 19, 2018 or 2019 estimates are based on an agreement that Todd Solar and their contractor made. We simply looked at the estimates that they provided and made sure that they were calculated correctly, and just to ensure that the state and the county didn't bore any costs associated with those. Again, and there's a provision within the licensing condition where the company is required to provide an update every 5 or so years.
And I recognize that. It was just a question of, how staff and PPRP provide guidance to the companies. And I have no problem with this today. It was just a question of, should we be looking at, inflation escalators, looking at future costs when considering the future liability of these decommissioning?
Michael Dean on behalf of staff. If I may say so, it would be very difficult to estimate what inflation is going to be 20 years from now. In fact, if you knew what inflation was next year, you could probably make a lot of money on the bond market.
Well, of course,
So
but
that's-
people
it's
routinely
very
have
difficult.
escalators, and I mean, we looked at the whole offshore wind, and we have an escalator set for the OREC payment. So I think we routinely look at that. And again, I'm not here to be argumentative. I just was just throwing that out there as a consideration, and I don't think it's going to be an issue just for any single project. But you know, looking at what the state goal is to have a number of these projects, we may want to try to get the best estimates we possibly can, so we know what the liabilities will be for the state in the aggregate. So that's all.
Yes, sir. If we were wrong and estimated too high, then it may result in projects not being constructed if the estimated total costs becomes higher than would
I
be.
understand, we're not trying to
United States.
discourage, but at the same time, the reason for the decommissioning is to make sure counties and other local governments aren't, you know, potentially held liable for these costs. So again, I wasn't trying to be argumentative, but it just jumped out at me that we're talking about these being estimates, but we're using, you know, 2018, 2019 labor costs and not considering any types of inflation, and even in the own in the own decommissioning report, it says future costs will be dependent on, or the cost will be dependent on labor costs at the time of decommissioning. So, I mean, we got into great detail and like, gee, we need this $23,000 factored back in, but you know, we're talking about 20 years out in the future and not, you know, reflecting that labor costs are likely to be higher and inflation probably will escalate these costs. So again, it was just a thought as PPRP and staff look at these in the future and guidance they might want to provide the companies.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there a motion?
Motion disappeared. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Chairman. For item number 4, I move that we approve the company's revised decommissioning plan filed on October 4th, 2019.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved.
Mr. Chairman, last item on the agenda is Washington Gas Light Company filed its semi-annual STRIDE report. It's case number 9486.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Annette Garofalo on behalf of Commission staff. Section 410 of the Public Utilities article, Annotated Code of Maryland, provides for the recovery of reasonable and prudent investment associated with accelerated gas company infrastructure improvements through a surcharge. By order number 88943, issued December 11th, 2018, the Commission approved a STRIDE 2 plan for the company. WGL's first STRIDE 2 project list, approved in January 2019, an accompanying surcharge was subsequently revised on July 3rd, 2019. Consistent with practice established during the first STRIDE plan, WGL has filed its calendar year 2019 mid-year report on the status of the 2019 projects. At this time, WGL requests to cancel 2 transmission projects and to decrease the number of meter replacements due to the duplication of these projects in the company's ongoing lists. The report indicates that the company is emphasizing completion of its STRIDE 1 project. Staff has adjusted WGL's STRIDE surcharges accordingly. Mr. Tesfaye, I didn't think I asked him before, but I don't think I got that right, of the Commission's Engineering Division, Mr. Patterson of the Commission's Accounting Investigation Division, and Ms. Tuberty of the Commission's Telecommunications, Gas, and Water Division are available to answer any questions the Commission may have regarding this report. Staff recommends that the Commission note the filing, approve WGL's request to alter its project list by canceling 2 transmission projects, and reducing its meter set replacement list by approximately 1,853 sets, and direct the company to revise its STRIDE surcharges consistent with the revised list as soon as practicable. And that is a little different than the what was contained in staff's comments, because there we talked about a new tariff, but actually the tariff is fine. It's only the rates that need to be revised.
Great, thanks for explaining that, Ms. Garofalo. So we have a lawyer, an engineer, an economist, and an accountant, and then we just have Mr. Dodge by himself. But before I turn to the company, does Office of People's Counsel wish to make any comments? I know you filed a pleading.
Morning, Your Honor. I don't think there's really much else to say other than what we said in our pleading, just noting that I haven't been at OPC for very long, but every time we come here for Stride, I always feel like I'm saying the costs are varying wildly, and so we really made some efforts to try to find a way to come to the commission with solutions rather than problems, and we're hopeful that in our last case we came up with a way for us to meet, confer, and address these variance issues outside of these proceedings.
Okay, thank you, Mr. O'Laughlin. Mr. Dodge.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. That team walked into a bar together. I guess we'd have a good joke. We do have our panel here today. I'm happy to invite them up if the Commission has any questions for us.
Would you like to recognize them?
Surely. We have Wayne Akas, Jack Morrow, Aaron Stuber, and Matt Esmacher. They are all managers of our STRIDE program. And if you have any individual questions, again, I'm happy to bring them to the podium or to council table. I just have a couple of remarks.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
It is an optimistic report that we present to you today, Your Honor. We are well beyond 50% complete for our 2019 project list, and as a snapshot only, we are running 39% below budgeted costs to this point. That delta will narrow. We are still anticipating that we will have a positive cost variance by the end of the year on the order of 5%. Recently, we have run into some permitting issues with 7 distribution projects. That has affected some of their Phase 2 work, but we still anticipate that the Phase 2 work will kick off on January 1. I'm very pleased to report that of our carry forward projects, that is from STRIDE 1, there were 30 remaining projects under STRIDE 1. 29 are complete. There's 1 pending paperwork in the field, and that will be complete in the next few weeks. So all of our STRIDE 1 projects are pipe complete, and very soon will be paperwork complete. As Ms. Garofalo mentioned, we do not need a tariff revision. We'll simply plug in staff's new numbers into our surcharge algorithm to spit out the new rates for the next billing cycle. Finally, Mr. Esmacher is available to address the 2 transmission projects that had substantial cost variances. If you'd like him, I'd like to hear from him. And that's all I have. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. I would like to hear regarding those cost variances. Obviously, OPC highlighted them in their pleading. But before we bring him up, I was just curious, did you have any objection to staff's recommendation that WGL file revised tariff sheets?
Not an objection. We don't need to revise the tariff. The tariff is just the algorithm, and we agree with staff's recalculation of the surcharge, so we'll be plugging new data into the algorithm to generate the new surcharge.
Understood. Perhaps before we call Mr. Esmacher up, do the commissioners have questions of Mr. Dodge? Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Dodge.
Good morning, sir.
Wondering if you could comment on the company's ability to retain workers and staff to complete the projects in a timely manner. Has this been a challenge for you thus far, or how's that been moving along?
It has been a challenge, and I may get Mr. Akas up here to correct me if I misspeak. We do have contract work. Obviously, all of our STRIDE work is done by contractors. We believe we have sufficient capacity at present. It's a competitive market for those folks, but we do have them locked into contracts, and we're confident we can get the work done. But you have identified a key issue. It is a tough market for these resources.
Have you been having any challenges with local governments, with permitting and things of that sort?
How long do you have, Your Honor? The short answer is yes, and in fact, one of the transmission projects, we ran into a state highway administration issue. So we continue to work with local, county, and state government for permitting and other issues. They continue to be a challenge. I will say, from my personal perspective, I think that Maryland is easier to deal with than, say, the District of Columbia, but we still do face challenges.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, why don't we call Mr. Esmacher up and he could shed some light on the projects that are above projections at this time?
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. There's two projects, two transmission projects that are currently over budget. One is called our Strip 14 Valve 4. What happened, the details on that project are generally for transmission projects, they operate at pressures that are much higher, 250 pounds of pressure. It's a 24-inch pipeline. And what we do is we generally take two valves and throttle those valves and reduce the pressure in that pipeline. And then we insert bags into the pipeline and expand those bags, inflate them, to seal off the portion of the pipeline that we're going to, or the valve in this case, going to replace. So we reduce the pressure, insert at two valves on a pipeline, insert two bags, inflate them, and then relieve all the pressure in the pipe between the two bags. That's typical how we would do these projects. Unfortunately, it was missed in the original estimate that there was a feeder line that went to a reg station off that same pipeline in between the two valves that we would throttle. That reg station needed to be fed at a much higher pressure. That meant that we couldn't reduce the pressure and we're no longer able to use the bags. The bags can't withhold much pressure against them. So we had to install TD William fittings, or what they're called, close into the valve that's being replaced, so that we could then feed the higher pressure to the reg station, and the TDW fittings can withstand higher pressures, and then you can install those, relieve the pressure, and that costs more money. The other option was to install a much longer bypass line around the lower pressure valves that we were going to throttle down. Unfortunately, that would have been more expensive than using the TDW fittings. So when we use those fittings, we actually had to do a much, what's called engineered shoring. Instead of our traditional shoring, we had to use engineered shoring. Those two reasons caused the cost of that project to increase.
So these fittings are the sole factor, or the primary factor for the cost variance?
Yeah, it's basically, bags, if you will. They're sort of rubber and canvas style bags that you inflate versus engineered, very expensive, welded in fittings, correct.
You could use them multiple times though, it's not a one-use fitting?
The fittings can't be moved, but they could be if you wanted to use them again later, you could go back into those fittings later and reuse them again, correct.
Okay.
Once they're installed, they're permanently installed though.
All right, so the fittings cannot be removed.
Correct.
I suspect OPC alluded to in their pleading that they may raise some of these issues in a future rate case.
Yeah, just so you know, the cost increase is about $345,648 was the original estimate, and the new forecasted cost is $566,000. So a difference of about $120,000 or so increase at this point in time.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you. Oh,
yep.
do you have more?
Yeah, one more project was a valve replacement at Strip 24 at the Village Drive and Crane Highway. Again, the estimate for this project was $240,000. Roughly, the new cost is estimated to be, forecasted to be $330,000, so about $90,000 increase. And on this one, the Maryland Department, SHA, State Highway Administration, not going to say illegally, but without approval, ran a conduit for a pedestrian crossing across our pipeline. They delayed our permit, and by the time we got out there to do the construction, we found this new conduit had been placed across our pipeline, encroaching without our approval. They admitted it. They apologized. That's all we got out of them. And but that caused us to have to use engineering shoring again for that project instead of the traditional shoring to get around the new utilities. And that cost the increase for that. That was the result of the increase for that project.
All right, and you said that was about $90,000?
Yep. Estimated at this time $90,000.
So that was Strip 24. The other one was Strip 14. Are those the only two projects?
At this time, those are the only two that we're estimating to be over budget.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hessmacher. I don't have any additional questions. Commissioner Richard?
I was just interested in OPC filing, and it talked about the company agreeing over the next 6 months to work with OPC and other interested parties on establishing protocols for mitigating and documenting, I guess, the costs variances. And it also seems to indicate that it will also, I guess, provide some kind of a determination as to whether the costs have been prudently incurred. Is that correct? Is that what you're agreeing to? The company's agreeing to do, to sit down and help, I guess, guide us as to whether these costs are prudently incurred for the variances and help us with that prudency review? Is that what's supposed to take place?
If I can break it down into two piece parts, Your Honor. You're exactly correct on the first part that we agreed to a minimum of 2 meetings in the next 6 months? In the next 4 to 6 months with OPC. I envision those to be collaborative, back and forth at our Springfield location so that we can educate OPC on our processes, perhaps take them to a STRIDE site and answer any questions they have about our estimating, about our STRIDE construction practices, and so on. I think it's the goal of both parties to understand each other's positions going in and then hopefully come to some better understanding of everybody's positions going forward. With respect to the prudency determination, I believe the language you're looking at reserves OPC's right to argue that a particular project is not prudent. In other words, just because they agree to come meet with us, they're not agreeing that what we show them is prudent. So I would characterize it a little differently than you have. The commission will always have its authority, I believe, to determine the prudency of any particular expenditure that the company has made.
Okay, that's helpful. I was just trying to understand exactly what was going to happen in these meetings and whether there was going to be some general agreement from these protocols as to what was prudently incurred or not, and if that would be, because I think the last sentence here, the recommendation is that then we should consider these protocols when making our determination. But you're not saying
Again,
now that this protocols, once they're established, will again indicate to us that the company is in full agreement that with the outcome.
I would say that if we agree to protocols, then the company will be on board with those protocols, but the parties have reserved their rights to disagree at the end of these meetings as well.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Surely.
Thank you for the parties. Thank you for Washington Gas for providing all the staff resources today. I don't have any additional questions. Is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, for item number 5, I move we note the company's 2019 semi-annual STRIDE report, approve the company's request to cancel 2 transmission projects identified in its filing, note the company's shortened 2019 Program 5A meter list, and direct the company to adjust its STRIDE surcharges consistent with the company's revised 2019 project list to be effective as soon as practical.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved. Seeing no additional business on the docket today, have a great day. This meeting is adjourned.